Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Phillips, and I am the Director of Event Content Development for ISACA. And thank you for joining us for another ISACA Live. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Kelly Hood. Kelly is a cyber security engineer for Optic, and she is also one of our speakers for our upcoming Digital Trust World Conference in Boston this coming May. And today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to join the conversation today. My name is Kelly Hood. I'm, like you said, a cybersecurity engineer at Optic Cyber Solutions. And I'm really excited to talk today about measurement and communication around cybersecurity, which is what we'll be largely talking about at Digital Trust World next month.
Yes, great. Well, we are looking forward to your presentation. And in fact, I've already had a chance to review your presentation. So let's start out with some kind of general questions. In your presentation, you use terms like cybersecurity capabilities and cybersecurity maturity. So without giving the entire story away, can you talk in general terms about what those two concepts are, cybersecurity capabilities and cybersecurity maturity?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I think a lot of the conversation around cybersecurity are these days are those capabilities, like you said. And to me, capabilities are what are the things that we're doing? What are the technology we're putting in place, the functionality that's there? And then maturity on the other side is how well are we implementing these capabilities? So we not only need to have the technology, but we need to have it implemented effectively in a way that's working for our organization. So that's one of the topics we really want to get into is kind of how do we bring this together and make sure that our capabilities are mature and implemented in a way that's going to help our business rather than having, a bike lock on the front door that somebody can just knock off, or a padlock, or a biometric scanner or something that nobody knows how to use.
Nice, very nice. And also, you talk a lot about measurement, right? I recall a term or a phrase that I heard years ago: if you didn't measure it, it didn't happen, right? So I know that measurement is very important. So I know you encourage people to understand the difference between metrics and performance when you're measuring cybersecurity capabilities. So what do you mean by that?
Right. No, it's a great question. And so many times, if it's not something that we can see or measure, did it really happen? As if a tree falls in the woods, did it, you always
Right.
hear the joke. And that's why it's so important, I think, to measure what matters. And that's kind of the trick, I think, with cybersecurity, because so many times it's the things that we measure, we kind of have to step back and look at it in context and say, how much do I care? Or if there's a new vulnerability, obviously we probably need to address it in some way, but is it on a high risk system? Is it on the system I don't really care about? But being able to kind of take a step back and think about it in context. So that's where I think of performance as looking at, how well our capabilities are performing, and not just looking at the numbers of, there were 100 vulnerabilities. So what, probably not a good thing, but we need to think about what does that mean? How is that going to affect the business? And really looking at that information in context.
Yeah, that makes real good sense. So when you talk about cybersecurity capabilities and measurements, I know a lot of companies have basic metrics that they customarily measure and review and make decisions on. But what are in your experience, what are some of the most common gaps that organizations have in their cyber capabilities?
That's a great question. You're right, because there's so many things that we measure, how many vulnerabilities, how many assets do we have, how many incidents, what does the training schedule look like, how many people have taken the training. And so we've got all of this data, but I think really what's so hard to do is to, like I mentioned, to take that step back and say, so what? Everybody did the training. Was it effective training? Did anybody learn anything? And really, and that's kind of the next step of once we start gathering this data and have the information at our fingertips, did it work? We put in the biometric scanner. Is anybody using it, or is everybody just leaving the door open because nobody knows how to work it? And so it's not really effective. So I guess in summary, the things that I think we're getting so much more information with all of the tools and technology that's out there today, but being able to look at it in context and think, so what, is really the hard part. of figuring out, how effective is this, and then making sure that we're measuring the right things. Back to if we're not measuring it, does it matter? We have to make sure that the information we're using to make decisions is the right information.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I recall in your presentation, you talk about measuring what matters and not measuring what doesn't matter. So I thought that was very insightful. So you often also talk about ISACA's CMMI cyber maturity platform. How would you describe that platform, and what are some of the benefits it provides to measuring and understanding and even communicating cyber capabilities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the CMMI Cyber Maturity Platform hits a lot of the points that we were just talking about with understanding what are the capabilities we need, how do I talk to somebody about it, how do I quantify it. So really the platform, I think of it in three key phases. Is it helps take a risk-based approach to understanding what you should have. So when we think about maturity, how mature do I need to be? We think about CMMI's 5-level maturity scale. Do I need to be a 1, a 3? Do I need to be all the way up to a 5? But figuring out what, based on our organization's unique risk, how mature do we need to be? And then taking a look at our capabilities, figuring out what do we have in place today? And then finally being able to bring all of that information together and put together a roadmap to really understand in context what we have, where we need to be, and then how we're going to get there. And then it's got a bunch of reports to help out with the communication side as well, which is the next tricky step. Once we have the information, how do we tell somebody about it?
Based on some of my experiences with working with leadership and the board of directors, it's really important to know how to communicate with people at that level and what to communicate. So what types of reports do you consider to be most helpful and actionable for executives and boards in interpreting where the organization stands on this journey of cyber maturity?
Right. That's a great question. I feel like that's the question of the year or the decade, maybe. But it's a challenge of being able to get the information across now that we're getting all this information, what do we do with it? How do we communicate it effectively? So I guess just for some examples, we've seen, worked with a lot of different companies in the work we do conducting assessments and, implementing cybersecurity capabilities. We use everything, different types of charts from, bar charts and spider charts and line graphs and all things like that. And then we always have on the documentation side, your executive summary and full 100-page reports. But really, one of the things we always have to come back to is what is the message we're trying to get across? And that's why there's really not a silver bullet for everybody needs to use a spider chart or everybody needs to use a particular type of graph or heat map, because it really depends on the information you're trying to get across and what you want them to take away. So one of the things that we try to do is step back and say, if they take away one message from this meeting, what is that? And then what's the most effective way that I can communicate that message? And usually it means taking away 5 things that we thought we wanted to say or 5 pieces of information to make sure we get that one point across.
Oh yeah, that's good advice. And and sometimes when I speak, one of the things I always talk about is make sure you speak in business terms, because many of our senior leadership and board of directors, they're not cybersecurity professionals, so you have to speak their language, right? And also, where you can, quantify and interpret what this means from a dollar perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I 100% agree. That's one of the things we always have to remind ourselves, I feel like, as cybersecurity practitioners, that I love to be down in the weeds. I want all the data, I want all the information, but not everybody does. And so being able to kind of boil it up and think about, I want to say the so what, if you've got all of this information in a 100-page report, so what? What are you really trying to tell me from this? What is that takeaway in, like you said, in business context? How does that relate to the dollars and cents at the end of the day? What do you want me to do with this information? I completely agree. That's one of the hardest things to do oftentimes, is to step back out of the data and out of the details and think about, so what?
Yeah, exactly. Because oftentimes we're asking for an investment, we're asking for more money, more headcount, right? And we need to convey to our audience, why we need that. So here's the next question for you. Can you share an immediate term action or a long-term action our audience can take back to their organizations to improve how they measure and communicate their cyber capabilities?
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the first thing that comes to mind for maybe a shorter term thing is to really just kind of think about what's working today. A lot of times we can look around and see, we get focused on what's not working or what's broken or the things that are frustrating us every day. But sometimes there are things, that are working, hopefully, and we can learn lessons from that. So if we've got certain groups within the organization that we're reporting to or sending information to, and it's working really well, I'd say to think about, why is that working? Is it because the type of information you're sending them, or because they like to receive the type of information that you like, and everybody wants to be in the weeds, is my vote. But to think about, why is that working, and then see if maybe you can take that model and transfer it to another group. Or is it that, some of the other, as we're reporting up the organization, they really need less or more concise information, focused on that. So what? Is one of the things, is just kind of thinking about who is the audience. What, just because it's working today or not working today doesn't mean we can't fix it and improve moving forward. But just also expanding on thinking about who is our audience. Again, like we talked about, if it's the C-suite or the executives, they probably really are focused on the business. How does this affect the business? I don't need to know how many vulnerabilities there are or how many systems you patched. I hope you're doing that, but I don't need the details. I need to know how it matters to operations on a day-to-day basis, and being able to roll that information up. One analogy we make sometimes is thinking about, as again, as cybersecurity practitioners and wanting to be down in the weeds, we're used to all of this, and so we understand the language, what plays off of what and why it matters. But if you think back to the first time you started, learned how to drive a car, and your parents sitting with you and they're saying, okay, now put on your seatbelt, check your mirror, check your other mirror, check your other mirror. Don't forget to see, put your foot on the brake, look both ways, and they're telling you to do all of these things at the same time, that now it's become second nature to all of us. But to the board of the C-suite, cybersecurity probably isn't second nature,
Right.
or at least not yet. And so being able to remind yourself, you got to, take things slow, and organize it in a way that will relate to them.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it a couple times about not being in the weeds. So here's where I go off script. I warned you that I would, right? So what are some of the types of reports that may not be geared towards the C-suite or the board of directors that we may need to share with the lower level, maybe middle management or what have you? What are some of the types of attributes that we would look for on those types of reports?
Hmm. The big thing I think that doesn't get talked about enough is sufficiency or effectiveness. So if there's a way to communicate, not only, what was done, but how impactful it was. I think often we've all seen probably the images and the, articles about, a video camera that's behind a sign. So it's not really working. Technically, we have the camera, but it's not, seeing anything, or, having a gate that, everybody's driving around, or a door that's unlocked. So finding a way to communicate to everybody, especially when we're talking to people with different backgrounds, of why it matters, not just, I need you to do vulnerability management, I need you to do incident response, asset management, change control, all of these things that we know need to happen, but being able to say why. We want to make sure that we have these secure processes so that we can operate the business, and having that lens, I think, as we were talking earlier, about making sure that especially when we're talking across the organization, up and down, making sure to keep that business perspective in mind, and then focus on, the so what, the outcomes, and why it matters, and if it's being effective.
Awesome.
So that's probably a lot of things, but
Yeah, no, I like it. So here's another off-script question for you. So you're a cybersecurity engineer. Can you talk a little bit about that profession, if you will, how you got into it? What are the advantages, if you will, and how would one become a cybersecurity engineer? A lot of times we have people join on that are aspiring to certain positions in cybersecurity. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and actually my story is, I'll say, I didn't take a straight, or it wasn't a straight path to get here. So maybe that's the first thing, is there's no one way to make it happen. So hopefully that's a little bit of a relief to everybody. I actually got my degree in chemical engineering, not cybersecurity or IT or anything like that. So I was in an engineering field and started taking, while I was still in college, some classes around cybersecurity and thought, hey, this is really interesting. So again, it's not definitely not a linear path. But I think being able to just find something that you have a passion in and being able to learn and wanting to grow in that field is really what's most important. And knowing that specifically for cybersecurity, that it is ever changing, which is one of the things that makes it fun, is that, it's not going to be stagnant. It's not going to be the same day to day. And I really enjoy that. So I guess, starting out, if you know what you want to do and you can pick that degree path, or even a lot of times you don't necessarily need a degree to get into the field, but getting that hands-on experience and being able to demonstrate, that you understand the concepts, I think is a big, will put you miles ahead to be able to talk about it and understand what the capabilities are. But yeah, I definitely didn't start off on this path, but through different positions and jobs was able to get more into it and just kind of dug in and really enjoyed what I was doing and kept learning. And here we are.
Right. And obviously you're pretty good at it. You've had some successes. So congratulations to you. So I got another question for you. What are you most looking forward to when you're speaking as well as attending the Digital Trust World Conference in Boston?
Oh yeah, no, I'm very excited about the conference. And really one of my favorite things about being able to go to a conference, especially in person these days, is just getting to meet with people and really learn. And I know that sounds silly. Of course, you're going to learn at a conference, but being able to just engage with people. And I think even in our session, we're going to be presenting, but I'm hoping we'll have interaction from the audience, because there's always more to see, what worked for you, what worked for them, and being able to get feedback on that, because it really does matter, everybody has a different experience. So I know there's a bunch of sessions I've been eyeing on cybersecurity risk. I saw a session on CMMI and supply chain, and even security champions, I think, and being able to create that role in organizations to help, drive communication and buy-in. So there's a lot of different sessions I'm already eyeing to go and learn, and hoping that others will participate in our session and not just listening, but just discussion, and to help share their experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a lot of sessions, on risk and governance and audit and what have you. And that's because we have many people from many different professions. We have a lot of auditors come to our conferences, a lot of risk professionals come to our conference. And so I'm setting up my next question for you is, what if I was transitioning? You said for you, it wasn't a straight traditional line to get to where you are. What, if you will, would you suggest a person transitioning from the risk profession or the audit profession or even governance? What are in your mind, some of those transferable skills that they should bring that would make them successful in cybersecurity?
No, that's a great point. And really, I think there's so many of, I want to say, kind of the soft skills, or the being able to look at what's around you and analyze the information and summarize it down, or to kind of look at all of the moving pieces and figure out the so what. That really, it's often, at least in my role, and working from a more strategic perspective, helping companies to manage their cybersecurity program. It's the looking at information and context, analyzing, disparate pieces of data, and figuring out, so what. So it's not always the technology. Obviously, we need to, eventually have that understanding of the technology as a foundation. But the really critical skills, I think, that you can learn in so many of these other professions that are, transferable on day one, is the, being able to do the analysis and look around and see what's important, or who wants what type of information, and how does this relate back to the business.
Yeah, so being analytical, being a critical thinker, and based on the title of your presentation, being able to communicate, right? Having really, really good communication skills. A lot of times, especially in very technical people like you and I, sometimes we're really strong in that area, but we may not have those strong skills like interpersonal skills or communication skills. And And in this case, communication is extremely important, not just verbal communication, but being able to communicate, by writing well as well. So
Definitely. Even you mentioned resources. Oftentimes that's one of the biggest challenges. And if we can demonstrate, why we need resources and communicate that effectively, to leadership, that can be very helpful as well.
yeah, absolutely. So this was just a little for our audience. This was just a little teaser. I'll be in Boston and I plan to attend your session, Kelly, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to give you the last word, if you will. What are some parting words, remarks, advice, anything you want to share with the audience?
Oh yeah, thank you. And yeah, again, thank you for inviting me to join today. I guess my summary or my parting thought would be really to look at the information in context. That's my big takeaway. Is there's a lot of information out there. What does it matter to you and your audience? How much do they care about that? What is the piece of information that they really need to know moving forward? So look at it in context and then summarize it down to make sure that it's what they need.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And I would encourage all of you to go on our website and check out our program. We have some really exciting presentations like Kelly's. We had a Chat GPT masterclass. I know that's all the rage right now. A lot of talk about Chat GPT on social media and in the media. So if you want to learn more about that, we do have that masterclass. I believe it's the very first day of the conference right before the kickoff. So make sure you check that out as well. And Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us on today. And thank you everyone for joining. Take care.
Thank you.